going on, Reject Nation? Greg Alba here.
And I'm John Humphrey.
So we did our non-spoiler review of Bright, and I keep emphasizing how I feel like I have to give spoilers to explain my reasoning for issues with the film. So it's gonna just be the issues, essentially what I'm going to talk about here. And there's nothing.
Max Landis wrote this.
That's my biggest issue. Is that pervert? Yeah.
Sorry, I just learned a lot of things in the last 10 minutes.
So overall, if you guys didn't catch our non-spoiler, John and I both enjoyed it. He would probably give it a 3.5. I give it like a 4. I think the world is really cool. I think Will Smith and Joel Edgerton are really cool. Totally. And I think there's a lot of great things in this movie. The issues that I have really come in the last half of this film, and that's when the film gets a little bit bigger than it needs to be. I kept fearing when I was watching it, because I know this is David Ayer, and I was like, oh my god, is this gonna go down Suicide Squad Enchantress territory? Blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't fully go there, but it goes there just enough for me to have issue with it.
It doesn't go full off the rails like Suicide Squad, but it does flirt with that line of being a bit too much, and some of that kind of takes away from the more original elements that make the first part of this movie so much fun.
Exactly. For starters, the elf storyline because the elf storyline is fine to me, and I like the inclusion of the elves, and I like how they're written to be these like kind of scary, the enemies of the movie. I felt like they could have been more subtle with the bigger aspects of it, with the wand and the magic and the prophecy, all those things. I felt would have been better as subtle undertones as opposed to a lot of exposition and more exploration than necessary for this film. Because you have this one storyline within the feds where there's like the elf who's kind of like an anime character and his partner who's a human.
They kind of investigate any and all magical disturbances basically that are above the regular police's pay grade.
And the storyline that gets introduced a lot through that aspect and then eventually ties in with Will Smith and Joel Edgerton is the storyline of the Dark Lord is returning and he wants to conquer the world and take back what's his. And you could have done that a little bit more subtly. You didn't have to make it such a big prominent part of the entirety of the film. By the time the story wraps up, I realize those characters, they are so unessential for this movie. They don't serve a purpose. Because the information they learn, eventually Will Smith and Joel Edgerton learn the same piece of information outside of those guys.
And it just went really sideways from that point.
They have this elf they're protecting who has a wand who gives them all the information that this other storyline learns. And then by the time Will Smith and Joel Edgerton are being held captive by the feds, they don't even have a scene that's worthy of having them there. There's nothing revealed in that scene other than, yeah, they're gonna cover it up.
Yeah, I wish those characters had gotten more time or something to make that B-plot more engaging and more in line with the rest of the movie, because after a while it starts to feel like this afterthought, and partway through the movie, especially my complaints with the dialogue come in with those characters.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the idea of the world building aspect of it is really cool. Like, oh, the feds have this department that hunts down magic people. That's a cool element to infuse into this movie.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
However, it doesn't really serve the story.
Ultimately, no.
But my biggest issue is honestly the whole finale of the film. But Noomi Rapace.
Noomi Rapace.
She's a good actress and she plays her role well. But that's when it gets way too in-depth of the whole Dark Lord stuff. When her character dies at the end of the film because Will Smith picks up the wand, reveals he's a Bright, and then kills her. That was like too much. I think that was my exact words I saw. Like, too much.
Well,
too much. Don't like it. Don't like it.
They handled it too, because partly they telegraphed that so early on that I was like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen, and I just don't know when, and it's a lengthy movie.
I was wishing they wouldn't do it. I was wishing that Will Smith would not be a Bright. For me, that ruins a lot of what makes that character so cool. What makes the story so cool of just a regular orc and a regular human who are put in this mission bigger than themselves, and then to find out that, okay, you could have your prophecy elements, but put it towards the elf. Or if anything, make your Bright reveal be the orc, Joel Edgerton's character. It makes more sense for the story to go that path. It aligns it better with the Nick character for everything this guy's had to put up with his whole life.
Butterfingers.
And the fact that he's the one who believes in prophecies and everything, it would have made more sense for me for it to have been Nick, and it would have been more rewarding too.
We might be in a prophecy.
We're not in a prophecy.
For me, Will Smith being the Bright is more like, was this Will Smith's decision? Did he go to David Ayer and was like, you know, I gotta be the Bright, right?
See, I don't think that that's ultimately a bad way to go, because if you think, at least for me, I thought maybe having Joel Edgerton be the orc and now Will Smith is a special thing too. I don't love the whole just trend of chosen ones, but basically I didn't think this movie earned it very well.
No.
It's like, it's one of those things where at the last minute, we're gonna do that thing that we've established as chancy, but you know it's gonna work out okay. It's like, I can see why, if Joel Edgerton was the Bright, well then why does he need Will Smith? Because now he's two magic things at the same time. And so I'm like, making Will Smith special too does give them a bond. I just wish that the movie had maybe nixed the subplot with the feds and given more time to that or something, or did it in a different manner, because having him just be like, screw it, I'm gonna pick it up, knowing full well that the chances are slim and I might explode, like, it just feels so movie in that moment.
I felt like there wasn't really, even though it's telegraphed early, I also felt like it wasn't built up well for him to be the Bright. Because the idea of prophecy and all that comes in rather late into the film. So by the time it's revealed that he's the Bright, it feels like a very convenient plot point for him to kill off the main villain of the movie. That's what it read to me as, was, oh, this is convenient.
This is what they need to solve it. And the villains too, man, like the second she got to speak, I liked that character so much more. Because the villains, Noomi Rapace and her little teammates,
gangster
like,
elves,
they like barely speak, and then after a while they do become just like, oh yeah, they're just the villains we have to run away from until you know, Will Smith figures this thing out. And it does falter a bit when it comes to the handling of the magic wand. I think it's a good idea. I do think it's a cool, nifty place to take this. And they said, like, this thing with the power of a nuclear weapon, you know, that's like intriguing, but I don't think the movie handled that.
I don't think any of them needed to be the Bright. I don't think Joel Edgerton or Will Smith needed to be the Bright.
That
I think it would have
been another interesting
it would have been way more special that way,
if
because
they need Tika.
Exactly.
Now you're a part of our team.
Just make it Tika, make wannabe Harley Quinn. Because the first half, up until she started talking, I really was like, why is her whole design keep reminding me of Harley Quinn? Like, the hair, the flips, the acrobats, even the clothing in a way reminded me a lot of Harley Quinn, and specifically Suicide Squad's Harley Quinn. And that was definitely distracting. But it would have been more special if you just had her be it, because what made the characters so special, I've been watching the whole time, is that they're just two regular cops.
And it would be so intriguing to have an orc, a Bright, and a street smart, savvy human, because in that context, you know, Will Smith is their ambassador to the world, you know? And that could make something more intriguing than just what starts off being a fun, imaginative, sort of original idea that kind of sells out to the same beats you're used to.
Because while Will Smith's character has issues with having the orc as his partner, he doesn't hate orcs as a whole. He's not racist, but there are problems that are coming from him having him as a partner, and he doesn't trust him because of an incident that happened. So that all makes sense, but we also like Will Smith because of the fact that he's not like the rest of the cops who are like, screw orcs, yada yada yada.
He's not a bad dude.
He's not a bad dude. And then the fact that you make him a Bright takes away some of that effect of him being that good human now.
Yeah, I don't know. I
have major issues with it being a Bright. I have major issues with that.
Yeah, it's like in an intermittent way, it's kind of satisfying to watch at the exact moment. But the more I think about it, I'm like, this could have been so much more successful to me, because I did have a surprisingly good time watching it. But the more I think about it, the more I wish that they had kept the main conflict as the internal affairs thing, and then brought the magic wand in and addressed that in a different manner.
Like keep it in the real world. Like the internal affairs thing and the relationship, that was the powerhouse of the movie.
Yeah,
all this stuff with like Dark Lord and everything, like,
that's the uninteresting stuff.
That's the boring stuff. That's the stuff that's way bigger than the interesting stuff.
Like, do your tolerance metaphor and let's do all the levels of the police hierarchy instead of pulling the parachute halfway through and leading to this big showdown, which is a good moment, which is, you know, kind of an intense moment when he's talking to him outside right before the 4 cops come out to screw the both of them. You know, I wish this movie had stayed closer to the ground, like I said in the other review, and not gotten so distracted by cramming all the fantasy stuff in right now, because especially they greenlit the sequel the day before this came out, so they must have had faith in it, and I sort of wish they didn't throw everything at the first movie, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. And I also am not a big fan of sequel setups that are so, like, that's what The Feds felt like. That's what the Will Smith being a bride felt like. It all felt like sequel setup territory for me.
Yeah.
When I'm like, just tell the one grounded story you guys had. That was great.
Because everything's better when they're doing that.
Yeah.
Even the dialogue, like the dialogue is much better when they're doing that.
Yeah, and the situations feel legit intense.
Yeah, there is. I was surprised. That was one of the nicer surprises about this for me, is a number of those scenes. I was like, oh man, I don't know how this is gonna shake out. You know?
I mean, overall, I would still say it's a really good movie. I don't agree with it being just an okay film. Granted, the flaws I feel very strongly about. But without those flaws, I still got a good like 80% of this movie at least that is really strong to me. So yeah, that's just the spoiler territory we wanted to cover. Did you guys see Bright? Did you like it? Did Bright light up your life?
Ha 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 ha.
Well, you guys can subscribe to The Real Rejects. Click that notification bell. Make sure to follow us on Patreon. Patreon.com/TheRealRejects. It's like a second YouTube channel over there, people. Having a lot of fun. And also, what do you hope the Bright sequel explores next time? They go to New York.
Ah, New York cops.
Yeah, and the next one, Rome.
Rome, and then each time we add one more kind of magic thing until eventually everyone's a magic
get vampires and werewolves.
Yeah, Frankenstein monsters and creatures from the Black Lagoons.
Can't wait for
the
them
dark
to ruin
universe.
this even more.